you had this innate ability to get underneath the surface. So cut out all the BS. Whatever I might be saying is not what you're actually tuning into. You're tuning into something that's real. It was unleashed potential. It was looking deep into my soul as to what was inhibiting me and addressing that issue head on. Within a very short period of time, you had got to the heart of issues that I'd really suppressed. And that has sort of unlocked an immediate awareness, I've got to change. My name is Quentin Crowe. For the last 30 or so years, I've been working in marketing in a variety of different fields. I started my career working in the Lloyd's of London insurance market at a point in time where there's massive transformation. And I found myself in a marketing role which really hadn't existed. So there's an enormous amount of resistance that I was having to sort of deal with at the time. And in some respects, that sort of shaped what was going to follow, both positively and negatively. I was really lucky. I sort of worked my way up, and then the business was sold. I had a little bit of shareholding in the business, so the imposter syndrome really had started to kick in. I thought, right, let's go off and get some qualifications. So I had a bit of a sabbatical, and that was a real transition for me because up until that point, I had been of the sort of belief that, I was academically not that great. Go off, and suddenly I did quite well. So I then went into marketing training. I acquired a business and then built that. So I was doing some consultancy work on the side and was really my own boss up until about 8 years ago, when sadly that business came to an end. And that was really the sort of key moment in really my own self-belief. And various people who I trained over the years came back into my life. And that's actually how I think you and I were introduced.
Exactly.
By one sort of mutual contact. And there was a realization, I think, on my part that the sort of that imposter syndrome was inhibiting what I really wanted to do next. And there was a massive amount of self-doubt that had kicked in when my business had failed. And I was scratching around. And fortune brought us together. And here we are now.
And why did you choose to work with me specifically?
Well, I remember vividly, actually, our very first session, it was online, and you'd been sort of recommended as, from our mutual acquaintance, that that's this amazing woman, you've got to meet her. And I didn't really know what to expect. But within a very short period of time, you had got to the heart of issues that I'd really suppressed. And that has sort of unlocked an immediate awareness, I've got to change. So that was really a sort of the catalyst. I thought, yeah, we can work together. And there was a real meeting of minds, I think.
Yes, I agree. And that's exactly from my side as well. I think chemistry was really good. And I also saw that there was a potential, but something was blocking that potential. So for me, it was really intriguing to see, can we unlock that? Can we bring out your real self and get you to do the things that you really want to do and that you can do, actually? Can you share with me a little bit about what was the most significant challenge that you faced with your personal brand before we started working together?
Of course, there's a great irony. I think sometimes it's called cobbler's shoes syndrome, where as a marketer, I was terrible at marketing myself. But if we are looking at sort of branding in its truest sense, I think my real challenge was not so much what you could see, it was what's going on beneath the surface. And a brand is a reflection of what you really are and what a business really is. And there was a disconnect between the two. My self-belief was quite badly compromised. I was probably talking a reasonable game, but in order for me to transition and get back into a success mindset, I had to change what was going on beneath the surface.
And if you were using one sentence to describe the transformation that we managed to achieve together, what would that be?
I think it's, if I was trying to do one sentence, it was unleashed potential. It was looking deep into my soul as to what was inhibiting me and addressing that issue head on. That's a little bit more than one sentence.
So what is it about my coaching style that worked well for you?
I've had the fortune of working with a number of coaches. I'm a coach myself. And quite often it's quite formulaic. There are various frameworks and models that people use. I think what you have, which is genuinely unique, is that you had this innate ability to get underneath the surface. So cut out all the BS. Whatever I might be saying is not what you're actually tuning into. You're tuning into something that's real. So at times it's deeply uncomfortable and you have to embrace it. And I can imagine for some people that might be a real issue. But if you are honest with yourself, then I think the experience that I've had with working with you has been quite extraordinary.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's been uncomfortable at times, but I feel that's where the real change can happen. Because if you don't really see the reality, how can you make changes? And how can you start designing your life, your career, your business, whatever it is that you want in a way that is really you? So I feel that's a stage that in many cases we need to bypass in order to do extraordinary work. And talking about extraordinary work, can you share a few tangible results or improvements that happened in your personal brand while we worked together? And I know for you, it wasn't so much visual, it was more the internal transformation, but feel free to share whatever comes up for you.
I don't know whether it was a huge coincidence or not, but within 2 months of working together, I landed the most interesting project I've had in my career. And it was on a scale that was much greater than anything that I'd done previously. The big transformation, as you've alluded to, was my mindset, which was rather than think, God, I'm really lucky to have this, it was, you deserve to have this. There's a little follow-up, if I may, actually, to that story, because I was reflecting on it as I'm coming to the latter stages of that project as we speak. But I remember we had a session together and you challenged me about one particular issue, which was my client had given me some very favorable feedback. And I was in need of that validation. And you picked me up on it and said, why do you need this validation? You are really good. And it hit home. I realized that self-doubt had been requiring me to seek validation when I didn't need it. I knew I'd done a good job and I was continuing to do a good job. So why did I need to be told by somebody else? But maybe that's that sort of frail ego that still sits underneath the surface.
And I think sometimes we might not even be aware, because I remember this conversation, I have it very vividly in my mind. And I think even just reflecting that back to you and realizing that you needed that and you still hadn't built it from within was a blockage on its own. And I feel we bypassed that now, haven't we?
I hope so. It still raises its ugly head, but I'm mindful of it now. So when I hear that little inner voice saying, "Oh, does he like what you've done?" And no, you don't. You've done well.
And all of that, because I think like business is great and career and all of that. But what about on a personal level? So do you feel that the work we did together had any impact on your personal life as well?
It was fascinating without this sort of turning into a therapy session. But forgive me, Dad, if you ever watch this. But I have an extraordinarily high-achieving father who's now in his 80s and he's in the sort of obviously the latter stages of his life. And I've always lived in his shadow, or felt I've lived in his shadow, which possibly goes back to the sort of need for validation and all the rest of it. The big transformation for me, you made one incredible comment to me, which was, he probably won't be around to see your success, which hit home very, very hard. But it has also meant that my relationship with him has changed. And there was one little episode, which I haven't actually shared with you yet, which was they came to see us, my parents, last week. And there was one particular issue, I won't go into the detail, but I picked them both up and I actually called them. And it was like, the parent-child relationship flipped. And I called them out for what they'd actually done. And what was extraordinary was seeing my father's reaction, because in the past, it would have been pretty unpleasant. I think he would have asserted his authority, but he went into his shell and then reflected back. Sometime later, we watched him actually change color and said, "Are you okay, Dad?" And he said, "No, I'm embarrassed." It sounds such an innocuous thing, but actually it's been sort of transformational in terms of my relationship with him. And just this sort of sense, I'm quite, I'm in my late 50s. I should be the dominant figure in the family. But that has been a mindset that at a personal level has been really fundamental.
If there was something unexpected that you got out of the sessions, something that surprised you or an unexpected benefit that you gained through our sessions that was surprising for you?
Apart from what I've shared at a personal level, it's actually this rekindling of being brave again. There's some really stupid things which I've ended up doing. So we moved house last year and we've moved into a rural environment. And I found myself, signing up to do amateur dramatics, which sounds ridiculous. Bearing in mind the last time I did it, I worked out was 48 years ago. So I was a child. So I've had a career break of sort of 48 years from the acting profession. But
it's never too late.
It fills me with abject terror. Just started rehearsals and I've realised, my God, I'm terrible. I had so much to learn, not just the lines. But yeah, that's been the biggest surprise, is pushing myself out of my comfort zone and just trying new things, which I had sort of almost resigned myself to the fact, no, I've reached a point in my life where I get quieter, and if anything, I'm going the other way.
And that's one of the things that I am really proud of you, actually, to see you totally going out of your comfort zone and doing things that I know you haven't done for so long, both in business, in hobbies, in like different aspects of life. But I feel seeing you, how now you are actually taking control and doing the things that you wanted to do without fear almost, or acknowledging the fear, but doing it anyway, as they say.
Yes.
It's something really, really remarkable. And I'm wondering, what are you proud of yourself?
If you'd asked me that a year ago, my answer would have been different. Even if I was proud, I could never have admitted it because of that imposter syndrome. I think there's a recognition now that, yes, I'm proud, but I'm more excited. It's more about looking forward than looking backwards. So that is a big shift in the thinking.
Where do you think you would be today if we hadn't worked together?
I'm pretty certain, having had a number of years of scratching around, and I know just before we started working together, I was thinking, okay, how shall I retrain? Shall I be doing some other things at a much, much lower level? And I've realized that the difference between, even on a really crude daily rate of what you can earn with this, a tiny shift in mindset, is a decimal point shift. So I was thinking, okay, I will go and do some advanced driving instruction or something like that. I used to do a bit of racing driving back in the day. And I thought, yeah, that would be fun to do. But in reality, what I'm actually doing, which is working with businesses and helping them transform from effectively market followers into market leaders, well, at least 10x that daily rate equivalent. So to answer your question, I think I would have been scratching around, whereas now I'm really excited about working with much bigger businesses and organizations and realizing the value that I can actually add for them in a way that I would not have thought about a year ago.
And what is really interesting is that when our common friend introduced us and I looked a little bit about who you are, what you do, I was so impressed. And I was so looking forward for our first time that we would talk and get to know each other. And I didn't feel that you were as impressed as I was by yourself. And for me, that was such an interesting challenge because you have achieved amazing things. And I know you're really humble as a person and you're not really going to talk about all the things that you've achieved, but that wasn't coming through from the get-go. Like, I knew them because I've done my homework, my research. So I knew who you are, what you've achieved in your life. And when I first met you, I just saw a different person. and all this success that you have experienced, because you have experienced a lot of success in your life. You haven't mentioned about when you said about the business that you've built. Like, tell us a little bit about your business and how big your business was, because you're totally downplaying.
So I set up a business. Just going back a stage, I was very fortunate. There was a training business which had a number of accreditations that I got wind of was about to go under. So I was able to go and do a deal and with the primary certification body, and I hit the ground running. So we had a couple of hundred customers just to kickstart the business. That was in 2004. And then we grew. In that period, we got about 4,500 people through various sort of marketing related qualifications. We took that brand into some extraordinary places around the world. So I spent a lot of time in Nigeria, which was an extraordinary experience in itself. I went to Vietnam. We trained in Switzerland, in France, and various other places as well. We worked with some global brands that everybody be familiar with, ranging from Barclays, BT, Deloitte, Thomson Reuters, just a few that we worked with.
So the reason I got you to say all these things is because there will be people who will be seeing or listening that, and all these emotions that you've experienced, imposter syndrome, is something that I speak a lot about my work. And it's interesting that very successful people still feel it, and they still might be doubting themselves, or they might have moments that they're doubting themselves. So I just want to kind of put it out there that it doesn't matter how successful you can be, you can still have this emotion showing up because of different reasons and situations, but also to share that this can change. Like, you can go back into your confident self and feeling again the self-worth and seeing and acknowledging the success you've achieved. So if there is someone who is probably in a similar position like you were, what advice would you give them?
Lean into the pain. It's very topical, actually. As we are recording today, one of the largest clients that I've worked with for 8 years has just gone into administration. They are a 1 billion turnover business, and they've literally gone into administration. So one of their senior managers reached out to me this week, and I was sort of catching up with him, and he's had a stellar career, big four consultancy firms, etc. And he's ended up here, and this is the first blot on his career, really, on his CV, I should say. And I was sharing this very advice with him. I said, don't let this define you. When my business went under, there were, as always with these things, it's not one factor. You tend to internalize and think it's all your fault. As a leader, it was my responsibility. But on reflection, it was a myriad of things. Ultimately, it was my responsibility, but there were various things which happened. And with all disasters, it's a bizarre combination of little issues which suddenly all come to a head. So to some extent, it was slightly reassuring when a billion plus business goes under, because you think, well, okay, mine didn't reach that size, anything like it, but it happens to the best. The advice that I gave to this individual this week was, it's going to be very painful, but lean into it. And I remember this was some advice that you gave me a little early on. Don't let it define you, but use this as a reflection to think, okay, I'm Brazilian, I can get out of this, but what are the lessons I've learned? Hopefully for this individual, he will find that actually this would be an extraordinary transformation for him, however painful it might feel right now.
And I agree completely with you, because I don't think it's what happens that defines us, it's how we deal and how we get over things that are happening to us, and how we come back stronger and better after every experience that we have in life. So what's next for you?
Well, I sort of alluded to it a little earlier on that I'm very excited. There's a number of new opportunities which are presenting themselves. And I'm really excited. There's a potential collaboration I have with somebody that I have worked with for many years in a variety of different capacities. I had a call from him yesterday. He's over in America at the moment. He's at a big conference, and he came back to me. He's like, yeah, I've got all this. And he's all got hyper excited. He's an incredibly successful individual in his own right. And I'd pitched an idea of collaborating together a couple of weeks ago. So look, I think this particular marketplace, there's some really fascinating dynamics. We've got complementary skills. I know you've made an awful lot of money, you're highly successful, but motivates him is a sort of the intellectual challenge of doing bigger things. And we have an extraordinary opportunity. We've got already a couple of major prospective clients in the pipeline who we can start talking to and pitching some of these ideas of working together. So who knows? Years
So
time,
you're building a new business, sounds like.
It is, yeah.
Amazing. Is there anything else that you would like to say? Anything?
I think what I'd really like to do is to say thank you, because we touched on it a little earlier on. I think if our paths hadn't crossed, and I feel incredibly blessed that that happened, I would have been resigned to a very different lifestyle and thinking about what the final chapter in my career is going to be. And rather than it tailing off, I've recalibrated completely. So my final message is to say thank you.